there's so many reasons and so many examples of instability in our world right now that it's incumbent upon all of us at a leadership level to demonstrate the opposite, because that's really who we are as human beings. Again, that's what makes us human beings, that we have the capability of caring for one another, not just your loved ones, but people who are strangers to you. And, seeing what has happened over the course of the year through this pandemic, seeing the examples of charity and volunteerism that responded to the pandemic, I'm more excited than ever that the compassion movement globally, but also here locally, is going to make us a more a happier city, a city that we will be proud to raise our children in. And that is perhaps contrary to some of the things that people are saying about our world right now and the tumult that's going on. But I think that compassion will always win. And I'm excited to live in a city that is so affirmative about it.
We are very grateful to you, Mayor Nirenberg, for taking the time to speak with mayors, deputy mayors, board chairs, council members, chief administrative officers, and senior staff enrolled in Kalen Academy's Resilient Civic Leadership Program, which is rooted in compassionate integrity training through Life University's Center for Compassion, Integrity, and Secular Ethics. We are very enthusiastic to better understand your inspiration and commitment to compassionate city building and compassionate civic leadership, as well as some of the secrets to your success. Mayor Nirenberg, you have not only championed compassion as a central organizing principle, but launched several successful associated initiatives, which in some jurisdictions could be seen as unpopular, but in your case have led to your continued re-election, most recently for a third term, congratulations, with an overwhelming majority despite a field of 13 candidates. We are also joined here today by several honorary guests, including Global Charter for Compassion Executive Director Marilyn Turkovich, Compassionate Dallas-Fort Worth President Charles Barker, co-founder of Life University's Compassionate Integrity Training Program and Associate Director for the Center for Compassion, Integrity, and Secular Ethics, Michael Carlin, Director of Training for the Center, Jennifer Valtos, as well as San Antonio's Faith Liaison and Community Organizer, Ann Hamke. Thank you all for being here and for your dedication to advancing compassion in communities all over the world. Thank you also to our Resilient Civic Leadership participants representing over 24 municipalities here today. Now, Mayor Nirenberg, when you took office in 2017, San Antonio's first resolution was to sign the Charter for Compassion, declaring San Antonio to be a compassionate city. And in fact, I was reminded as we were just entering this session, not even reminded, just advised that today is the fourth year anniversary of that date. What a coincidence. During the pandemic months, when so many local governments were faced with crisis and constrained budgets, they abandoned even traditional local government operational training. You spearheaded an initiative to establish a mass civic education campaign, the San Antonio Compassion Institute, and initiated compassionate integrity training for civic and educational leaders from 85% of the city's universities, colleges, and schools. This is no small feat, especially considering the size of your municipality, over 2 million people in the area. And San Antonio was the first community in the world to offer this type of citywide education aimed at building systemic compassion into every action, decision, and policy institutions enact. As the founder and director of Kalen Academy for Civic Leaders, it is my honor to host this event, during which time I will be calling on our mayors, deputy mayors, and board chairs to pose their questions to you related to these incredible initiatives and accomplishments. Our first question is from City of Revelstoke Mayor Gary Schultz. Mayor Schultz.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor Nirenberg, and all of you for being present today to allow us to ask questions. I'm in awe of being in your company, so thank you. My question, Mayor Nirenberg, first I'll just explain a little bit. I'm in a city of Revelstoke, which is a ski tourism community. We have the longest continuous ski run in North America. It's over a mile from top to bottom. After a couple runs down that ski run, most people are worn out. We have a small community. It's 7,500 people by census. By tourism, we have about 14,500. So very tiny community, lots of issues regarding finding homes, that sort of thing for people in our community. So for me, compassion is something very dear to my heart. I've been a funeral director for 41 years here in this community, and so I kind of bring that cross to what I do here in City Hall. My question to you is, how was support built at the council table to sign the Charter for Compassion? And then what kind of support did you have from the community?
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, and Diane. Also, thank you very much for hosting this event. I'm honored to be among you, and probably like you, view compassion to be one of the core fundamental values that unites all of humanity. So, to me, the movement to compassion being recognized as fundamental to policymaking is second nature. And really a recognition of who we are as a community here in San Antonio, but who we are fundamentally as humans in this planet. And I would say because of that, the charter itself, the movement to sign the International Charter for Compassion was really from community. In fact, I remember the very first meeting I had in a house when I was thinking about running for city council, maybe 10 years ago, was organized by the Peace Center, which is an organization that carried the banner and has carried the banner of compassion for us in terms of many different initiatives. And that was the first time I had heard of this movement to sign a charter for compassion in the city. Obviously, many years have gone by. And in 2017, I remember very distinctly, I was on the campaign trail as I was an upstart candidate for mayor. And we have Citizens to be Heard, public hearings every Wednesday evening. And a group of young men came to the council, and they can talk about whatever they want to talk about. And it was very interesting. It was a group of Muslim and Christian young men coming to the council to urge us to join the Charter for Compassion movement. Of course, I had already known those young men. I had worked with all of them in their interfaith efforts. And I also knew about the Compassion Charter. And at that moment, I promised them and promised myself that if I were to be elected mayor, the first document I wanted to sign as mayor was the Charter for Compassion, to affirm our city's roots and also to essentially establish compassion as the fundamental policymaking value that I would lead this administration by. And I was very proud to do it. As Ann mentioned, you mentioned, Diane, that this is the 4th anniversary of us doing so. Because it was generated from the community and because we did it together as a resolution unanimously voted on by the council on our very first days of taking office together, it has been very easy to garner support. And you've seen initiatives resonate from that charter from that very moment, some small, but some incredibly transformational for the city.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Marion. And our second question comes from Regional District of Nanaimo Board Chair, Tyler Brown.
Thank you and good morning. The question I have, I think, is fitting because I discovered in preparation for today's Zoom session that there has already been some movement in my hometown of Nanaimo, which is part of the regional district, around the Charter for Compassion. However, that is the first time I've ever heard of it. So clearly there's some work to do, which leads into my question. What concrete actions has the city of Antonio taken to live up to the ideals in the Charter for Compassion?
Well, thank you for that question, Tyler. And I can't emphasize any more Well, I can't overemphasize how important the charter is in terms of being a touchstone for us as a community and for our elected leaders specifically. So any encouragement you need from me to continue to pursue that, please ask. But in terms of concrete actions, there's several elements to our charter that are important and that ultimately lead to action. And I'll just focus on a couple. There's essentially 5 pillars to our charter for compassion, but in particular, one of them talks about generating compassionate action through local initiatives in every sector: public, private, community partnerships, educational institutions, businesses, et cetera. And another pillar is recognizing and celebrating compassionate action when they occur. So using those 2 pillars, I think it's been very easy for us to generate and to recognize compassion in action. And so I'll focus on a couple of things that we're doing. Diane already mentioned the Educational Institute, the compassion training that we're doing. I'm very proud of that. In fact, in its initial year, 2020, in the height of the pandemic, we had 85% participation from our educational institutions incorporating compassion training into their local departments, et cetera. This year in 2021, we are now at 100% of our higher education institutions are now participating. And they're also within that training component, you can see examples of institutionalization of this. As an example, University of Texas Health, University of Texas San Antonio Health is requiring a compassion course in each of their departments within UT Health. We also have a case study that is going to be released very soon from the 2020 Institute to kind of exemplify the reasons why we do this kind of training. There's also a smaller initiative that we're doing. I'm recognizing now at council meetings compassionate San Antonians with awards. They can be small acts of compassion or large, grand acts of compassion, but we are recognizing them and recording them for the public. And also another thing that we're doing is we're scouring the local media for stories of compassion, even if they're not recognized with an award. We're looking through our local news every day and we have San Antonio volunteers doing this, looking for acts that people do, that organizations do, that may or may not be seen as quote unquote compassion, but we're recording them in our logs. We have now over 5,000 stories over the last couple of years that have been recognized as compassionate acts that, again, show that San Antonio is a compassionate city and that this compassionate charter speaks to who we are as a city. I think Anne has the, yeah, go ahead, Anne.
I've just given Anne access to.
I'm just sharing things as you speak of them.
Okay.
Yes. We're just a bit delayed. It would have complemented it nicely while you were speaking, but we can definitely provide these resources to everyone after the talk as well. And our next question comes from Lori Mindich, who is here representing the past president of the Southern Interior Association of Local Governments, but also a councillor with the village of Lumbee. Lori?
Yeah, thanks, Diane. Yeah, thanks for being here as well, Mr. Mayor. My next question, you've kind of half answered it, but what actions have community groups actually taken to live up to the ideals of the Charter for Compassion? And how dovetailing on that, and how are the Compassionate City initiatives coordinated with these community groups?
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, for that question. And I think everyone here already knows Ann Helmke, Reverend Ann Helmke, who is in San Antonio. If you don't, she is our faith-based liaison. And in that charter, one of the other pillars is a structural recognition that our faith-based liaison is the glue that holds all of our community organizations and residents together in terms of how these compassionate acts and compassion as a human value is being centered and coordinated with our city. And as an example, most recently, Anne worked with several different organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, local nonprofits like our San Antonio Food Bank, even our Defense Department, Air Force, the Air Force Chaplain's Office, worked together to create a COVID-19 memorial that was unveiled a few weeks ago, where we had members of the community who have lost loved ones come and sign and place pictures on hearts that are displayed publicly. Again, recognizing the lives of neighbors, the loved ones who we lost during COVID, sharing their stories. And there are, I think, over 3,500 of these hearts now displayed on a fence line in the center of our city to recognize all of the loved ones who we've lost during the pandemic. We have other acts that are coordinated and recognized with our San Antonio Compassion San Antonio Awards. One most recent was a San Antonio plumber. We had a winter storm. It was horrible for infrastructure, as well as also the human toll was significant. And we had a plumber who was getting calls about fixing pipes and had decided he was just going to fix pipes, regardless of people's ability to pay. And he was doing that morning, noon, and night. And we recognized his efforts to bring a little bit of relief to folks, some of our most disadvantaged residents here in our community. There are so many stories to share. We don't have enough time to talk about them all. But, again, credit Anne and the faith-based liaison in the office that she's led to help us coordinate all those efforts.
Thank you. And our next question is from City of Roslyn Mayor Kathy Moore.
Hello, Mayor Nirenberg. Thanks so much for meeting with us today. I have a tiny connection to Texas in that my daughter-in-law is from Austin, another fine Texas city. My question to you is that we recognize that many of the commitments made in the charter are related to issues such as homelessness and the opioid crisis, and that those things lie within the responsibility of other levels of government, whether that's provincial, state, or federal. And what do you say to those who argue that these issues are outside the scope of local government? How do you blend those things together, and also outside of local government's budgets? Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for that question. I know that's probably something that you get all the time as well. And as you know, issues like homelessness and drug addiction, mental health, all kinds, regardless of whose jurisdiction they are, always fall to the local level to address. When it comes to people's basic needs, if they are not met anywhere else, then we have to catch and we have to provide relief because we are the last line of defense for our residents. So we can't ignore it. And we try to intervene when others can't or won't. And that helps us to establish again that beyond all the other responsibilities that we have as government leaders, our basic responsibility is for the welfare of our community and the humanity and the compassion that it requires to address it. I would say that it's an easy conversation to have in communities like ours, where we are so in your face about being compassionate to each other. And we have a business community and others who, many people wouldn't see that potentially as their first order of business, but are quick to remind us that when they practice compassion, it also benefits their bottom line. And also it helps with quality of life, and that people's moods improve. And by the way, when people's moods improve, so does productivity. Our immune systems benefit. We feel better. So there's so many reasons for us not to look the other way when issues are not being addressed. And I think in making compassion a strategic goal for our community, we've been able to highlight that and gain support, even when it might not seem that that's our jurisdiction, so to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Nirenberg. So many reasons not to turn a blind eye, for sure. Next question is from Deputy Mayor Sarah Fowler of Village of Tassos.
Hi. My question is, why is engaging in compassion on a city level important to you personally?
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. And I'll cut to the chase. I didn't expect to be in politics when I was growing up. It wasn't what I thought I would be pursuing at this point in life, but just as many have experienced, having or being responsible for a child, being a father, has changed my perspective on a lot of things. And I wanted to do what I could do to improve the life and lives of my son and his peers when they took over for us. And so what we do is try to make the world a better place. And, and in my mind, having a city that cares for each other, that is kind, that addresses issues of equity, which we've also made a fundamental principle, and which I think emanates directly out of this Charter of Compassion. I want to make sure that we're modeling the kind of world that my son would inherit, and that he would want to lead, and would also want to model after.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Mayor Owen Torgerson of Village of Valemount.
Thanks, Diane, and good morning to you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with so many like-minded folks. Very pleased to see one of my 2020 alumni, hi Rebecca, and as well as a real rogues gallery of my colleagues from almost every corner of British Columbia, beyond. Mayor, Valemount is similar to Revelstoke and Rossland. We're one of 14 designated resort municipalities here in BC, and Valemount is one of the most northern of those resort municipalities. We've diversified our economy from a one-and-done dimensional forestry sector and transcended into backcountry tourism, forestry-based value-added markets. Now, the pandemic has shown both a need to focus on community well-being and an economy. So, Mayor Nirenberg, how do you utilize compassion skills in your policy and decision making?
Well, thank you, Mayor. And it's hard to see where it's not being utilized. I think you can sense when it's not in the room as opposed to when it is. So I would say that it influences everything. And specifically, I just mentioned equity. When I became mayor, we became the first big city in the country to use a framework of equity to do our basic budgeting and resource planning. And what I mean by that is that we did analysis of historic disparities in our community. And rather than using rough proportionality, whereby every political jurisdiction gets equal share, we decided that we were going to account for those disparities by putting our resources where they're needed the most, to address historical disparities that were as a result of racist policies of the past, redlining practices, et cetera. We began budgeting our resources that way. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've now done that for 4 consecutive budgets. We're going to continue to do that because, as we know, addressing historical disparities can't be done overnight. It probably can't be done in a decade. It's going to take a lifelong commitment, and that's what we're committed to, at least under my watch. And by solidifying that value as based upon compassion and having this in our San Antonio Compassion Charter now, I'm confident that focus will remain. And also, if we raise children the right way, they will continue to make equity and compassion fundamental to what they do, regardless of their spheres of influence. The other example I would give is in 2019, you may remember there was a migrant crisis. There is an ongoing migrant crisis here in Texas in the United States. There was another crisis very similar that was occurring in 2019, where we're getting a flood of asylum seekers to the southern border that were then transported from the southern border and literally dropped off without notification in several different cities, big cities in Texas and elsewhere. Our city very quickly snapped together a migrant resource center. Basically, we turned a downtown bus depot into a health clinic / travel center in which people would be screened and get treatment that they needed. They would get food and clothing. And we also had a church next door that would provide shelter for them and several different partner churches. All told, within a few months, we had over 32,000 people that came through San Antonio and sought shelter, food, clothing, basic needs, compassion. And we did that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is that, obviously that's a great thing. And we're very proud of it. But what was more remarkable about it all was that, again, it was about 2 years after the Charter for Compassion was signed. And if we are clear about what the charter means, is that we're going to act from a foundation of charter and everything, a foundation of compassion in everything that we do. I didn't call the city manager and say, we've got to put together a migrant resource center. We've got to handle these thousands of folks who are coming in. I didn't call, the police department or anything like that. The media didn't make start to shine a spotlight on the floods of folks who are coming in with no resources. This came up organically from our city organization and from nonprofits who just, as soon as there was a need, there was a flood to fill it. And volunteers were, they immediately snapped to action. And so to me, it was my first inclination, real feeling that we had incorporated compassion into our daily lives in such a way that it could create massive action, massive mobilization without a thought. That was an indication to me that the charter was rightfully recognizing what already existed in our humanity here in San Antonio, and that we had a great story to tell about it because it was manifest in the Migrant Resource Center that year.
Thank you, Mayor Nirenberg. We are actually coming near at the end of our time, and we still have 3 questions which could be considered interrelated. Is there a possibility that perhaps I could acknowledge the 3 mayors and they could ask their questions and you could end with some final comments?
Sure.
Sure, sounds great. Okay. Mayor Gabby Wickstrom is the mayor of the town of Port McNeil. First, Gabby, you could ask your question. Then Mayor Valeria Vandenbroek from the city of Langley. And then Mayor Dennis Buchanan from the village of Alert Bay. Please go ahead, Mayor Wickstrom.
Yeah. Good morning, Mayor. My question for you is, how has the focus on compassion impacted the way conflict or disagreement are handled around the council table? Thank you.
I guess I'll go next. How has this focus on compassion impacted the way the most vulnerable are treated in the city?
Mayor Buchanan? Oh, you're muted. Mayor Buchanan, you're muted, yes.
Sorry. Morning, Mayor. And how has compassion made San Antonio a more equitable and inclusive city?
And since I can slip it in, Mayor Nirenberg, I'd just love to ask you what long-term cultural impact you believe this civic education, the San Antonio Compassion Institute, will have on your city.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much for the questions. And again, I'm honored to be here with you among like minds and public servants, all of you. So let me just kind of go through. I think this is having immediate impact on us, the charter, mostly in terms of highlighting and recognizing what already exists and bringing it out into the open. If we're realistic, what makes us human beings is our ability to care for one another, to have empathy, and ultimately turn that empathy into action and through compassion. And so, as it relates to how we interact with each other, particularly in the way that we resolve conflict, obviously that's a work in progress always. But I would say that particularly in the political sphere at the local level, we've had many, many disagreements. But generally, I would say that we've learned to handle them correctly. And when, at least among colleagues, when we have disagreements, we handle them the right way. And when they're maybe outside the lines, people quickly to get together and resolve and apologize as necessary. As far as the way that this has impacted the most vulnerable members of our community, that also is a challenge and a work in progress always. But I do want to highlight some of the work that's going on with the faith-based liaison, the work that Anna has been doing in mapping equity issues in our community and mapping the most vulnerable residents where they live to match the resources that are inherent within the nonprofits and other organizations in our community that provide services, and matching that with the population that we have that needs those services. There's a website called Sacred, SACRD.org. If you go to that website, you can see a compendium of nonprofits, other organizations that provide compassionate services, all kinds, from housing services to nutrition and food services to behavioral health services. And we try to match those using an equity index tool to the populations that need and that are vulnerable in our community. So we are working on filling those gaps wherever they occur. And it's through this work, in particular the website, that we're able to make sure that it's focused in the right way. As far as how this has made San Antonio a more inclusive and equitable city, we've done some survey work. And when we started the institute, the Compassion Institute, in 2018, we did a survey that indicated that 73% of those surveyed indicated that the initiative was having an impact, positive impact on our city. 60% said that San Antonio was becoming a more compassionate city. If we flash forward 1 year, those numbers jumped up to 90%, showing that the initiative was having impact, with a 19% rise in those who believed we are seeing more compassion in our city. Those numbers are up again in 2020. And of course, that's the latest year for the data. So the initiative, I think, again, is highlighting who we are as a city and encouraging people to express it, which I think has everything to do with how we perceive ourselves and our role in working, interacting with one another, just neighbors to neighbors. The last thing I'll say, in addressing your question, Diane, about how this will affect us long term, I think that this is again a global movement that is going to impact everything that we do in terms of understanding how we belong in a city, how we belong in community, and again, not being afraid to go out on a limb for one another, to care about one another, and to do it out loud. There's so many reasons and so many examples of incivility in our world right now that it's incumbent upon all of us at a leadership level to demonstrate the opposite, because that's really who we are as human beings. Again, that's what makes us human beings, that we have the capability of caring for one another, not just your loved ones, but people who are strangers to you. And, seeing what has happened over the course of the year through this pandemic, seeing the examples of charity and volunteerism that responded to the pandemic, I'm more excited than ever that the compassion movement globally, but also here locally, is going to make us a more a happier city, a city that we will be proud to raise our children in. And that is perhaps contrary to some of the things that people are saying about our world right now and the tumult that's going on. But I think that compassion will always win. And I'm excited to live in a city that is so affirmative about it.
Mayor Nirenberg, we were already inspired before you joined us today. And after this, I'm not sure what type of compassion revolution is going to be unleashed. But certainly, I couldn't imagine a better day for this to happen. Today, we're heading into our session on appreciating interdependence. And we've just, finished speaking about extended compassion and all the things that you've tied in and have are living out in your work and your civic leadership. Really gives us confidence to carry on. Some days it seems very difficult, and this ability to meet together and to learn from each other and to be inspired by shining examples like what's happening in San Antonio. And thank you also, Anne Helmke, for there was a few people that made this day possible. Charles Barker and I had a discussion, and we just needed to get to the bottom of what was happening in San Antonio. And we met with Anne, and I'm very grateful that you agreed, Mayor Nirenberg. And of course, none of this would have been possible without Marilyn Turkovich, the Charter for Compassion Executive Director, and Michael Carlin, the co-founder, but also co-author of the Compassionate Integrity Training Program. Thank you also for taking extra time today, Mayor Nirenberg. I know we're a bit over time, but we are very grateful for your efforts. And thank you all of our session participants as well.
Thank you so much, Diane, and all of you. Good luck, and however San Antonio can be helpful, we stand ready, because again, it's our neighbors are not just across the street; they're also across the world, and we look forward to joining you on your journey.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.